Well, hello here. I'm just going to, in this video, offer my thoughts on upgrading Rega turntables, and this will include my thoughts on the new RP range, which I haven't really given my thoughts on YouTube, so I'll do that. I'm going to start off though with the old range because I think there's a slightly different design philosophy going on in Rega, and I'll need to go through the old range just to sort of fill you in on a bit of background. I'll try and be as quick as I can though. Okay, first of all then, what you've got in front of you here is the Rega P2 turntable. Now this is going back to about the year 2000 here, because this is when the sort of the newer-ish kind of old range of Rega turntables came in. Okay, as you can see, it's a very basic turntable. It's a little less basic than what you can see in this picture here. This is just a Google image that I found of it. Never had one of these. It's got, to start with the turntable platter, it's a sort of a woodeny, sort of plywoody sort of thing here. I don't know exactly what the material is, so you'll have to take everything I say here with a pinch of salt and check what I say here, but basically that's some sort of wood turntable with a sort of felt or woolen felt mat there, which Rega have sworn by, and I think they're okay. You can upgrade your turntable mat if you wish, and some people swear that they have different sounds and stuff like that, but you really need to sort of hold on here for what I think is probably the biggest thing that you could probably do to upgrade your Rega turntable. Alright, just over here, this is the arm, this is the RB250 tone arm here. It really is an absolute gem, and although it at the time was the most basic Rega turn arm that you could get, a lot of manufacturers, and they still do, they take this tone arm and they tweak it, and they can, you know, rewire it and drill holes in the tone arm and that sort of thing to all sorts of proportions, and really make it into something absolutely special. Origin Live, for example, are very famous for their Rega tone arm tweaks, as are Mitchell, who with their gyro deck turntables will offer a tweaked Rega RB250 to mammoth proportions, and sell you an absolutely stonking good turntable. So don't poo-poo that tone arm. In its basic form, it's actually very good, and it can be made much better by rewiring and tweaks. There are firms around who will take a basic RB250 oopsie-daisy, I'll try not to get too tongue-tied. They'll take a basic Rega P2 turntable and again take the whole thing and tweak it to amazing proportions. So, you know, it's a very good cooking basic deck to get. And if you've got a few quid to buy a turntable with, find one of those on eBay. Check it works if you possibly can. You know, like near you or something, if you can get it near enough to you to be able to go and have a look at it, check that it works and everything. It's really worth buying. As far as cartridges go, Rega's own Bias 2 cartridge is probably a sensible cartridge to go with the basic deck, but you could probably upgrade it to something like the Elys cartridge, or the Elys 2 as it is now, and other cartridge makes such as Ortofon. Probably something like the 2M Blue would be quite a good match to go with it. I would never really recommend spending more than the deck itself on a cartridge, although some people do. Again, people have fitted those RB250 tone arms with all sorts of different cartridges and got really good results with them. So yeah, that's a very good basic deck. Okay, next we are going to go on to the Rega P3. Now this one, I did actually have one of these many years ago now. I got rid of my Goldring Lenko turntable, which you can see on YouTube, and got one of those. The turntable on that is a glass turntable. It's a 12mm slab of nice thick glass, topped with one of those woolen felt mat things. The motor on it is actually an upgrade from the P2, I believe. Much more accurate motor. And the tone arm on there was an absolutely stonking upgrade on there. The RB300 tone arm, absolutely world famous tone arm that was. It actually has on it, if we go back to the P2 here, this counterweight thing here was pretty much a suck it and see kind of guess kind of thing. You would have to probably use something like the Shaw turntable tone arm gauge thing that I've got to check the weight properly on there. But you did it by there's sort of grooved screw nut fit there, and a half a turn represented something like 0.5 of a gram of cartridge weight on there, and it was pretty much a very basic way of setting your tone arm. You can see just about the slider there for the anti-skating. None of the Rega turntables have VTA adjustment, and I've mentioned in other videos how I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing, or too important not to have a VTA thing. But now when we go to the P3 here, you can just about make out here, and in my setting up the tone arm video, which is very badly filmed I have to say, but you can actually see how you can actually set that. You can dial in the exact weight of your cartridge, and then just use a cartridge weight thing like the Shaw thing to just check it out and see whether or not it's exactly right. Again, the anti-skating weight was a similar sort of slider thing on this tone arm. This, I would imagine, I mean, I never heard a P2, I've never heard a P2, but I can imagine that it would have been quite a big sonic upgrade just in its very basic form here over the P2. I would have thought probably in things like detail, and tonal quality. I think the P2 was slightly rough around the edges, a bit boom tizzy in its basic thing. But I think, listening to it on its own without comparing it, I don't think you could probably fault it that much. I think it's a very enjoyable turntable to listen to, as was the P3. I loved my P3, and really it absolutely excelled at playing all those sort of 70s AOR vinyl records that I had, like James Taylor and Neil Young and stuff like that. Really, really, on the money with it. A bit woolly round the edges. The stereo image wasn't particularly well defined, but still it grooved. And I think the first thing that I put on it, I think, was probably something like George Harrison. I think it was his Brainwashed album, and that really sort of over and above the Goldring, it really danced, and that was with I believe an Elys 2 cartridge on there. Maybe an Elys. I think I had an Elys, and then I had an Elys 2. It was many, many years ago now, so I can't exactly remember the names of the cartridges I had, but I certainly I didn't go higher than an Elys 2 on my P3. So then, when I got the P5, which was still, and it was now a good few years ago that I got the P5. Where are we looking? Is that a P5? No, that's not a P5. I have got a P5. Here's a P5. As you can see, I'm just going around the internet here. I'm not doing a PowerPoint or anything like that. Pretty similar to my own. This has the RB700 tone arm on it. Now, as I said to you, the 250 tone arm really does withstand a huge amount of tweaking. Now the 300 does also withstand tweaking, but because it's a bit more of an expensive tone arm in the first place, not many manufacturers, or not as many manufacturers, would tweak an RB300 the way that they went to town with the 250. But Rega did, and this is their sort of take on it. In terms of operation, it doesn't actually feel much different from the 300, but inside the wiring has certainly been tweaked. I think the bearings have been tweaked as well. I think you know, one of the ways in which Rega do their upgrades is by sort of, you know, taking their basic thing, and then when they want to make a more expensive version, they actually just spend longer making it to much higher tolerances, which, you know, therefore it takes them longer, because I think they do an awful lot by hand, and so therefore that's why it's reflected in the price. But you've also got better wiring in there as well. I think there's been a slight upgrade of the plinth. Certainly you've got this sort of faux wooden surround here. That one's a black one. My one is more like this sort of cherry one round here. When I first got my P5, it had the Ortofon 2M Blue cartridge with it, which I have to say was basically, in the shop, that was basically what they had at the time. And I thought, you know, well, I can, you know, get a 2M Blue, an Ortofon 2M Blue, and then upgrade it as and when I'm able to. And the 2M Blue, as you can hear on some of my YouTube videos, is a very, very entertaining cartridge to go with this P5, and very modest in terms of the price of it. Okay, now this P5 here, it sort of represents the middle of the range, as it were, of the old Rega lineup, which went P2. There was not a P1 at the time when I bought my P5, so it was the P2, P3, P5, P7 and P9. And it was much more entertaining, much more detailed. Certainly the stereo positioning was much more precise, and you could really sort of see into the mix a lot more. Furthermore, the P5 over the P3 could take the power supply upgrade, which is called the TT-PSU. TT being turntable, PSU being power supply unit, which isolates the motor and the power supply from the rest of the plinth. It basically sort of makes the motor on the P5 or on the basic turntable redundant. And that is seen as quite a good thing, because the motor could quite often send vibrations into the tone arm, which you might think, well, that sounds a bit piddly really to worry about, but all of that sort of creates unwanted noise. Now you might not be thinking, well, you know, I can hear this noise, I can hear this noise, but it's when it's not there that you suddenly realise that actually it's a big difference. And I'm saying that because I've recently got myself a TT-PSU, and I'm absolutely staggered by the upgrade on that. I've also a couple of years after I got this, I got the Goldring 1042 cartridge, and I got a separate phono stage, the Creek phono stage. That was many years ago now. And yeah, just the cartridge and the phono stage made a big difference, but the TT-PSU is absolutely staggering on there. It sort of almost brings this into the range of the P7. Now the P7 here, I don't think they make the P7 anymore. It's double the price of, or the basic unit is double the price of the old P5. It's still got this RB700 tone arm on it. It has an upgraded counterweight, which means that it can take a much wider range of cartridges on it, because each cartridge will have its own weight, and the basic counterweight on the P5 and the P3 turntables will only go to a certain level before it won't actually balance out, you know, some of the more exciting cartridges. But the P7, I remember when I first got my P5, I read a review of the P5 and the P7, and they took the cartridge on the P7 to you know, stonking proportions of, again, you know, the same price as the deck. All right. Now this turntable here, you can see it's quite different. It reminds me of the old 1970s cap guns, the ones that took these little plastic rounds in and then they sort of swiveled round and you fired them again. But yeah, you still got this felt tone mat on here, but that's a sort of ceramic sort of material, and Rega say that it's the sort of thing that was used on the space shuttle, the same sort of material that was used on the space shuttle there. It only came with the TT-PSU, and you can see that the main difference is that this on-off switch, which is on the P5 and on earlier, there's the on-off switch on the P5, has disappeared because it won't work without the TT-PSU, and so therefore upgrading a P5 is pretty much you know, adding that TT-PSU is taking it nearly to P7 proportions. I think that the turntable itself is probably sort of again a good reason to upgrade. It will certainly have a very good effect on the sound, on the tonal quality. All right. When we move to the P9 here, now this at the time was Rega's flagship turntable. Okay, now you notice that I'm not actually quoting you from any of this because I can't read all of this stuff. I don't. Rega tries to blind you with science, and I really, you know, unless you know what, for example, a monocoque chassis is or phenolinic resin laminate is, then it's really not worth worrying too much about, because, you know, they could take the, you know, the RP1 or something like that and still blind you with science over the materials used in it, and, you know, it doesn't mean anything to me. So all I'm doing is talking in very pure layman's terms here. Okay, this used the RB1000 tone arm here. Now again, I haven't heard this. I would love to hear one of these. It's a completely different ball game to the RB300 and its sort of upgrade, the RB700. The thing against Rega turntables that I've heard is really this sort of emotional level. Really, they tend to be a bit sort of although they are absolutely fabulous, and so, you know, this is just an oft sort of level criticism at Rega turntables, is that they can tend to be a little bit grey and sometimes a little bit unemotional. You can't say that about this tone arm here, and it does therefore sort of lay the blame at the tone arm, because again, a lot of much higher quality record players will use that RB1000 tone arm. Okay, the turntable is completely made of this sort of I don't know, I'll call it space shuttle material for want of a better term here. And the P9, I've read reviews of it, and apparently it really is an extremely good turntable. Now, when you're talking about prices of the P9, I think it's about £2 grand. If you just bear with me a second, I think I could probably, if I go to analog seduction here, if I actually learn to type analog seduction here, I could find the Rega turntables. I think they're still actually selling it. This is not an advert for analog seduction. Yeah, now it's 2655. It wasn't quite as much as that. at the time. Let's have a look at a couple of prices here. There's the basic Rega P3, 475. Oh no, that's not. Forget that. We'll come back to that. Okay, but there is a Rega P9 there. They did have a P5 on there as well. Okay, but let's just say that the P5 is about a third of that price. Again, the middle of the range of Rega turntables. Okay, right, now having said all of that, okay, we're now going to nip now to Rega's own website. This is their new range. Okay, we've got the RP1 here and the RP1 Performance Pack here. Now the RP1 is a slightly different take on the P2. You can see this tone arm here. It's not the RB250. It's now called the RB101. It's even easier to set up, I do believe, than the 250. It's got the same sort of 3-point fitting to the turntable, which the later tone arms, and I'm not talking about the 300 here or any derivatives of that, but the later tone arms came with, have got like a single point mounting on the plinth, which supposedly is better. It gives a much sort of more rigid coupling to the deck. I'm not really sure what that turntable is made out of. I don't even think it actually says what it's made out of here. Does it say anything here? No, it doesn't. But having read reviews of the original P1, because they did make a P1 in between this new range, they fiddle-faffled around quite a bit with their range, really, and I do wish they'd actually settle on exactly what they want. But yeah, they having read a review of the original thing with a cork mat, it has to be said, and a sort of plywoody style platter, the motor on it is the weakest point. You daren't put a clamp on it. They don't really advise turntable clamps. Rega don't. Other record players, you know, they'll use clamps on there. But if you put a clamp on there, then you will certainly jigger up your motor, and so it's really not advisable to do so. Again, the basic sound quality with, I have to say, a bias or bias 2 cartridge on there is probably the way to go. I believe. I mean, this is a very basic cartridge here. They call it a Rega Carbon, which I've never really heard of before, but it looks like an old Ortofon style cartridge. You can get some very, very cheap Ortofon ones for, you know, about £20 or something like that, and that's what that looks like there. And yeah, with a bias cartridge, I think, you know, the sound of that on its own, without comparing it to anything, you know, makes a very, very good case for itself, makes a very, very good case for vinyl, you know, as opposed to, you know, something like an iPod or something like that. Really good, I think. I do believe, although I'm not entirely sure, but I do believe you can even put this TT-PSU extra power supply on that, and I think that would be quite a good upgrade to it. And yeah, if you get one of those, I think you could probably, you know, not really go too far wrong if, you know, you are on a budget. Okay. The RP3 now. Here it comes. Okay, as it stands, it will. It comes without the TT-PSU, as you can tell by the on-off switch there. Okay, that is actually a glass turntable mat there. It now has this sort of brace here that couples the arm to the centre sort of hub assembly here. That was absent on the earlier P range, okay, and they will sort of tell you that that's better somehow from what they originally used to do. Okay, you can see here the basic Rega way of changing speeds on things, which is pretty much the same as on other sort of budget turntables like the Projects, for example. You lift that glass turntable mat off, you take the belt and you flick it down to the or up, depending on which speed you want it to do. It's really very, very simple. Takes a few seconds to do. It might be seen as a little bit Stone Age and what have you, but it's very reliable. Okay, while we're talking about belts, any of these turntables can be upgraded with the Rega white belt, which I would say is a pretty good upgrade to do. It costs it's about 20 quid. I think the black belt now is £12 and the white belt is £21. So for the sake of 9 quid, buy one. It lowers the noise floor and it just seems like the turntable is not working quite so hard, and the sound that comes out is pretty much effortless. So there you go. That's the RP3. A pretty, I haven't heard one. That's the that's the rub here. All right. Now this is where I think that the philosophy is getting slightly sort of muddied here. Now, I should really now take a step back, because before they brought out the RP3, they did have this thing called the P324. Okay, this upgraded the P3 2000, i.e., wherever it's gone. I think that one there. Okay. And what it did, you didn't get that brace sort of thing there. That is the RB301 tone arm, which is the same as the RB300, but it's got that 1-point fitting thing where I was talking about, where it sort of fits to the plinth. Okay, and that's really the basic difference between the 300 and the 301. Okay, you can see the lack of on-off switch means that you have to use the TT-PSU with it, which is, I will tell you, a very, very worthwhile upgrade. An extremely worthwhile upgrade. Okay, so then after that, then they brought in this, wherever it's gone, RP3, which is pretty much the same turntable, but you don't have to buy the TT-PSU with it, so it makes it a little bit cheaper. I think if you saw my Analog Seduction page there, it's now £475, which is a lot more, it has to be said, than my P3, my original P3 cost in 2000 and something, in the early noughties when I bought it. I think that's also partly to do with the credit crunch and stuff like that. And this is the rub here, because I think that what they're doing now is just trying their very, very damnedest to get turntables in at the same price points as they had before, but not necessarily quite as well specified as the original P thing, because each one of those earlier turntables from the earlier range was a very, very significant upgrade over and above the other one. Okay, in particular, going from the P5 up to the P7, and from the P7 to the P9, and also, it has to be said, from the P2 to the P3. Slightly debatable, the P3 to the P5, although I think that tone arm upgrade, from the 300 to the 700, is a pretty darn good upgrade, and probably worth the money. But yeah, here I just think that they're trying to keep turntables at roughly the same price. If we now have a look at their upgrade now from the P3, it now goes to, or the RP3, sorry, it now goes to the RP6. Okay, what's gone? The on-off button. Okay, so you have to have the what do you call it? The TT-PSU. It's the same tone arm in essence as the RP3. Okay, it is the same tone arm. I think it's now had a slight upgrade because of this sort of brace thing that's on it here. I now think it's called the RB303. Yep, RB303 tone arm here with a 24-volt motor, which, you know, is pretty standard now across the range, apart from the RP1. It's a slightly thicker turntable platter than the P5. It's now 16mm as opposed to 12mm. But yeah, it's essentially a P3 with a TT-PSU. And what do we call that? A P324, basically. Yes, it might there might be slight design advantages and stuff like that over it, but what it actually does is it puts a Rega turntable at the same price as the old P5. Okay, this is really now the equivalent of the P5, even though essentially it's even more of just a tweaked P3 than the original P5 was. Okay, at least you got a different tone arm, which is, you know, a pretty substantial upgrade over and above the rest of it. You have got this TT-PSU, but to upgrade a P3 with a TT-PSU and to upgrade a P5 with a TT-PSU is I think, you know, a totally different kettle of fish in terms of the sound quality you'll get. Okay, now they have the RP8, okay, which is now, looks like it's phased out the P9. It looks like, although I don't know for certain, but it looks like you can lift out this central section here to get a sort of skeletal thing here like that. There are certain sort of turntable manufacturers that will make their turntables in that shape, okay. There was something called a Vector or something like that. I can't remember the exact name of it. I'm trying to think of it now. I don't necessarily particularly like it. I much prefer it as it is situated in the main plinth here. Okay. I'm not so sure about the turntable, exactly what that turntable is made of here. The arm is the RB808, which again, you know, is obviously a big leap over the 303 tone arm that's used on the RP3 and RP6. Okay, so this looks like, you know, they really are actually extending their design philosophy and making a flagship product. Certainly, the RP3 and RP6 are keeping turntables in that all-important, just above the bargain basement and middle of the range factor. I don't think... Oh, go away. I don't think that they could probably make a P5 now for the same price as it was in 2004 or something, and still have, you know, the same high quality, which is why I think they've basically tweaked a P324 and turned it into the RP6. So that is really my take on the basic stereo turntables of Rega. Okay, if you have something from the old P range from 2000, okay, and you're looking to upgrade it within the Rega range, I wouldn't necessarily go for like the closest number, i.e. if you have an old P1, for example, I wouldn't upgrade it with an RP1, even with the performance pack. I'd buy a white belt for it and leave it and wait until I've got enough money and go to somewhere in the middle of the range, like an RP6 or something like that. I certainly wouldn't take a P5 and upgrade it with an RP6. I don't necessarily think that would be worth it. I think, again, you know, if I was in the market to, which I'm certainly not at the moment, but if I was in the market to do any upgrading at all, then I would save it and go for an RP8. Try and get perhaps a nice moving coil phono stage to go with it, and a decent cartridge like an Ortofon condenser or even the Elys cartridge. That I'll have a quick squint at the cartridges with you in a moment. So yeah, really, if you've got a P turntable, and you're desperate to upgrade it, I think it's worth making a few jumps up rather than necessarily going for like the more modern version of the same thing. I don't necessarily think that the upgrade is actually well worth it, unless someone, you know, unless someone can actually really give me sonic evidence and prove me absolutely wrong. Then that's what I would say. I certainly have just had, you know, the odd glances at people on forums who are saying, shall I upgrade my P5 to a P6, or I've got an option to get a slightly older P5 on eBay, and it's a good one, and shall I buy a P6? And the answer is stay with the P5, okay? Because I think it's certainly more of an upgrade, and you know, you can certainly tweak it with decent cartridges, decent phono stage, that TT-PSU, which lowers the noise floor completely. You don't actually realise how noisy your electricity supply is until you put one of those on it on your turntable, and then suddenly you've got a whole lot more detail. The stereo image is absolutely, you know, for this level of turntable, I'm not talking about, you know, your SME turntables and stuff like that, because, you know, I haven't really heard them, and, you know, those are, you know, in the tens of thousands of pounds, as in, like, you know, compared to, you know, basically, you know, a few £100 for a Rega turntable. You know, it's you know, the comparison doesn't bear thinking about. But within the price point, the stereo image is absolutely precise. One of my favourite now records for testing it is Cut Me Down from Lloyd Cole's album Easy Pieces. I've spoken about this before. The singer Lloyd Cole is actually singing with his back to you, okay? On the P5, without the TT-PSU upgrade, it sounds slightly sort of, the vocals sound slightly recessed, okay? With the upgrade of the TT-PSU, which is a very modest upgrade, by the way, you know, it really is, you know, really, you know, if you've got a little bit to spare, you know, just, you know, cut down on your shopping and don't go to the pub quite so often in a month, and you can pick up one of those. But now, suddenly, the music, the backing moves forward. His vocal is even further back. It's going out onto my street now, because you've actually got 3D depth, you know, genuine 3D depth here, which I have to say was a bit lacking on the basic P5. The backing vocals are actually standing in front of him. Okay, side to side and in front of him, and there are more backing vocals there than I actually thought were present in the mix. Okay, and that's just through putting that extra power supply on there. It really is absolutely beautiful. I played Love and Affection on there as well, and the guitar, you know, is, yeah, the acoustic guitar is so lifelike. It's just, you know, it's there, it's in your room. Okay, you know, it's an absolute no-brainer if you want, you know, a basic upgrade to upgrade any turntable here. So don't buy, especially if you've got a P5 or a P7. Well, no, well, the P5 is really from the older range. It's the only one that could actually take the TT-PSU. Don't buy an RP turntable. Just buy the TT-PSU and just be staggered by the upgrade. Okay, I did say I'd have a quick look at the cartridges with you. Where am I looking here? Okay, this is their range now. Okay, the carbon, that is the one that comes with the P1 now as standard. Okay, never heard it. Okay, but for a P1, you know, and getting vinyl at a very good price, yes, go for one of those. Lovely. The Bias 2 is the next one up. Okay, I never heard one of those. When I first got a Rega turntable, they used to have one in between here. So they had a Bias and I think it was something like a super bias or something like that it was called, and then when they refined their cartridge range they just put the number 2 there. So the bias 2 there is pretty much you know, a sort of super bias kind of cartridge there. Very, very good cartridge. Okay. You know, if you've got a project table, you'll have an Ortofon 2M red, which is pretty much the same sort of level as the bias 2. An Elys 2, lovely, with my P3, absolutely gorgeous little cartridge there, and just, you know, it was like having a lovely blanket around you on a cold night, you know, just making you feel lovely and warm and just, you know, all fuzzy inside there, especially on, you know, the sort of vinyl that would have been around in the 70s when the P3 as a turntable was first introduced. You know, lovely, lovely, lovely cartridge that is. Okay, and that's the exact. Okay, all of these here are moving magnet cartridges. I've never heard an exact, but I think it's probably about the sort of level as the 1042 cartridge there, or maybe something like an Ortofon 2M bronze, something like that. And certainly has lots of plaudits. It's a very good cartridge. Okay. Their moving coil cartridge. They have got a moving coil cartridge. Only one, and it's called the Rega Afita. It's a pretty competitive cartridge here. Now, when we're talking moving coil cartridges, they really do come, you know, they don't come cheap. They're expensive, basically. And in the HiFi World magazine, which I sort of used to buy on a very regular basis, you know, they sort of condemned almost any cartridge, any moving coil cartridge below £1,000. Yes, they sounded nice, as it were, but in terms of doing what moving coil cartridges do best, you can only really see the difference over a very good moving magnet if you spend £1,000, which is probably, you know, more than double the price of a very good moving magnet cartridge. So I would say that unless you're getting something like a P7 or one of those RP8 things, I would probably steer clear of the Afita cartridge there. Probably with a P5, something like an exact would be quite nice, or, you know, like my Goldring 1042, which is a very, very competitive cartridge. And again, it's as old as the hills. It's, you know, I think again it's a late 70s cartridge, well worth having. You might have seen very quickly here, popping round here, you might, what am I doing? Back to the turntables very quickly. Here's the RP78, okay, which looks to me pretty much like a P1 or a P2 cartridge here. In fact, a P2 turntable. What am I saying here? Yeah, look, you see it's got the RB202 tone arm on here. The only speed it's got is 78, okay. If you want to play 78s, and you've got, you can get a cartridge, a mono cartridge that is the right size, has the right size stylus for 78 records. Don't try and play them with a modern stereo cartridge that's basically set up for 33 and 45, because you'll wreck your cartridge and you'll wreck the records. Okay. That, you know, would be a lovely thing, I think, to, you know, just to hear what your 78 sound like if you've got any. Okay. Right. They don't make an ordinary cooking mono cartridge, which is a bit of a shame, because it would be quite nice really to hear what, you know, my sort of original mono Sergeant Pepper sounds like played with a mono cartridge on a decent record player. But there you go. I've gone on far too long. I hope that's been of interest to people. And yeah, happy playing vinyl. You know, it really is very, very, very good. Okay, you know, and I would encourage anybody that is thinking about getting a hi-fi system to at least consider getting, you know, a vinyl source. Okay, you can't really go wrong with an RP1. Okay, again, you know, it's you know, save on your shopping bill for a couple of months, you know. Okay, and certainly, you know, after January's gone, you know, when you're thinking, how on earth am I going to pay for Christmas? After January's gone, think about it in February when you're bored and the weather's crap, and and yeah, think let's have a bit of vinyl. Okay, all right, bye bye.